Hello, guys. And today we will be discussing the recent recall questions from FMG June 2021. Now, before we actually start discussing the questions, let's take a review of the type of questions and the type of paper that it was. So, having been talked to so many FMG aspirants, we came to know that the question paper was a very moderate and a balanced kind of paper. It was neither too easy nor very difficult. Bouncers were very less. And I think there were quite questions from the previous year recall also. And as told by me and as guessed by us, there were a lot of clinical questions, and the last 3 sessions that I took before the FMG examination, as you people told me, helped you a lot. Many of the clinical scenarios, and I think the images were repeated directly from even the last day session that we shared on the DBMCI YouTube channel. So thank you so much for acknowledging, and I'm quite happy that these sessions helped you, and hope you will all come up in flying colors. So let's get started. The question number 1. A person is suffering from the injury to the eye with the vegetative matter or the leaf few days ago and now has developed the pain and photophobia. What could be the most likely cause? Now, before discussing this question, there is one more disclaimer that I want to share, that see, these all questions are based on recall memory. So obviously there could be slight changes, or the framework of the question could be different, exact choices may be different. So please bear with that. But actually we want to give you a whole idea that what kind of topics were asked, so that the people who are going to give the next FMG examination have a idea that what are the high yield topics, right? Okay, so this person is suffering from the injury to the eye with the vegetative matter. Now, we always know that whenever there is a trauma from the vegetative matter, what is the first thing that should come to your mind? So, it's always the fungal corneal ulcer. It is always the fungal corneal ulcer that we are thinking whenever we are having the trauma from the vegetative matter. And it's also an acute onset. It is just a few days ago. Pain and photophobia. Now, if you remember, I have told you this thousands of times, that simply on the basis of pain, you cannot rule out the fungal keratitis. Why? Because there could be a super added bacterial infection. Plus, the fungal corneal ulcers are having the signs more than the symptoms. So this does not mean that it is always asymptomatic. Yes, but signs are always much more than the symptoms. So what could be the most probable cause here? We have fungal keratitis, we have acanthamoeba keratitis, we have bacterial keratitis and herpes zoster. Now, 2 we can easily rule out. Herpes zoster and bacterial keratitis will not occur from vegetative matter, right? Now, we are having 2 things which can occur due to the trauma from the vegetative matter. One is fungal keratitis and another is acanthamoeba keratitis. Why? Now, if you remember, even in my videos, in my classes, I told you that acanthamoeba may be confused with so many of the ulcers. It could be confused with the bacterial ulcer. Why it is confused with the bacterial ulcer? Because the trophozoite stage of the acanthamoeba resemble the macrophages. That is why it can be confused with the bacterial. Then it can be confused with the viral. Why? Because it has a pseudodendritic pattern. So due to the pseudodendritic pattern, it can be confused with the viral, and it can also be confused with the fungal simply due to this vegetative matter. Now, why vegetative matter can cause acanthamoeba keratitis? Because it could be soiled, and acanthamoeba is a free living amoeba which is present in the soil. Now, why can't it be then acanthamoeba? Why? Because the most important risk factor is the use of contact lenses, and you do not have any history of use of contact lenses here. Second important thing is that in cases of acanthamoeba keratitis, pain is always out of proportion to the size of the ulcer. So here they are saying just pain and photophobia. They are not saying the characteristic features of acanthamoeba keratitis, like we have pain out of the proportion, we have radial keratitis, we have ring infiltrate. That is why the answer to our question is the fungal keratitis. So these are most of the questions have been asked directly from our notes and from our videos. You can see the fungal keratitis, the trauma, as well as the vegetative matter, both have been mentioned. So a direct question from our notes. Another question, which is again a direct question from our notes, classroom notes and the eGurukul. A newborn child has come with a watering, and on examination following image is seen. What is the most probable diagnosis? Now they have given you something that is called as watering. So watering is there, so we can say lacrimation is there, and they have given you the image. Now let us see what are the things which are seen in this image. So you can see that we have typically the large size of the cornea. So megalocornea is there. It would have been better that if they would have given you something like photophobia also or corneal edema also, but they have not given. Nevertheless, not a problem. Now you must be thinking that why we are saying that it's a megalocornea. So as I always say, whenever you see the eyeball, right? So if this is a cornea, the upper eyelid covers the superior 2 mm of the cornea, while the lower eyelid is just below the limbus. So you can see this space here when the corneal size is normal. Now here you cannot see this space. Because you cannot see the space, therefore it is evident that it is megalocornea, and moreover it's bilateral. Then it's a baby. So a baby having a lacrimation with megalocornea with bilateral involvement, what is the most probable cause? Now let us look at the options. Start from the option number D, congenital dicryocystitis. I think this is the most common cause of watering in the children, and it could be bilateral. But if you see that why do we have the megalocornea? A person who is having the congenital dicryocystitis will not have megalocornea. So it's very unlikely that this baby is having congenital dicryocystitis. Number 2 is congenital cataract. Now obviously congenital cataract will not have megalocornea. There will be no watering in cases of the cataract, as well as there is no megalocornea. So you are very, very clear that this is not a case of congenital cataract. In the dicryocystitis also there will be no megalocornea. Right? Now we have got Beufthelmos. Beufthelmos means congenital glaucoma. And if you remember, what is the ideal thing that I told you in the classes about this? See, I always say blue baby boy. Do you remember Bablu that we discussed in the classes also? So yes, the Beufthelmos, we'll write it with the blue color as we write it in the classes also. So this is your Beufthelmos. And in the Beufthelmos, we have got the blue baby and boy, right? Blue baby boy, it's more common in boys. It's a bilateral condition, and this baby will always present with the BPL card. What was BPL card? Do you remember? B for the blepharospasm. So baby can come with the lid spasm. Then P for photophobia. We will have the photophobia, and then we have L. L is your lacrimation or the watering. So they have given you this lacrimation here. They have given you bilateral involvement also. Now we know that the photophobia, out of all of these, photophobia is actually the earliest one, and lacrimation is the most common one. Now it is earliest, but it is non-specific. So we always discuss that what is also specific. We require something specific also. So that specific is corneal edema. Corneal edema is actually the specific earliest one, right? Okay, now if you look at the other option, that is megalocornea. Now yes, this baby is having megalocornea, so we can have Beufthelmos also, we can have megalocornea also. How to rule out the megalocornea? Why do a baby who is having megalocornea will have watering? No, there is no cause of watering in the megalocornea, but yes, in the Beufthelmos we have all the things. Therefore the answer is Beufthelmos, though it's not the best choice of the image that they have given. And the image that I show you, the one having the blue sclera also, also the hazy cornea, iris details not clear. We have enlargement of the eyeball also. And can you see in this of my image, even the blepharospasm is also visible. But nevertheless, you should be ready. And as I always say, the diagnosis of exclusion is the best way. So if you look, all the other options are not feasible, right? Therefore, the answer will be ophthalmos. Okay. Coming to the next question, and I think I have reminded you nth number of times that this is a very, very important image. Certain things, we know from the experience over the time that these topics have been repeated, and that is why, people say that, ma'am, did you make the paper? How did you know? So it's not like that we have made the paper, but yes, over the time when we have worked hard, we have seen that these questions have been repeated or these topics have been repeated. So we know that what are the most probable topics that could be asked here. So here we have got a young boy who is complaining of itching, watering, and we have got the rhinorrhea. Running nose is also there, and the image they have given, and they have asked you the diagnosis. I think image says it all. And the very, very typical, can you see the polygonal raised areas? We have got hexagonal areas, we have got pentagonal areas, all these things are there. So what is this? This is the typical cobblestone appearance. And where do you get this? In the VKC, vernal keratoconjunctivitis, or the spring catarrh. Another important thing is that they have already given you itching, and I always tell you that itching is always related with the allergic conjunctivitis. Whenever they want to ask you about allergy, they will always say itching. Whenever they want to ask you about infection, they will talk about the discharge. So a similar and a very same kind of picture which has been shown to you in the classroom and in the app also, cobblestone papillae. And see, even the last minute revision that I did one day earlier, I did discuss this VKC, polygonal raised areas. Yes. So one of the direct questions from our last minute revision that we did one day even before, and then a direct image from our classroom notes also. Okay. So what is the answer here? Is it trachoma? Trachoma will not have itching. There will be no itching in cases of trachoma. Then is it a bacterial conjunctivitis? No, there will be no itching in bacterial, and rather in bacterial you will have the acute mucopurulent. It would be an acute mucopurulent conjunctivitis that will be giving you typical sticky discharge. There will be a typical sticky discharge, and matting of eyelashes will be there. Person will not be able to open up the eyelids in the morning. So that will be there. Acute conjunctivitis? No. So the answer to this question will be your vernal keratoconjunctivitis. A very, very direct question, right? Next question is, a lady is suffering from sudden painful loss of vision with worsening of pain on the eye movements, and RAPD is also present. Central scotoma is also present. So again, a good question, and they have given you a lot of clues towards the diagnosis. First of all, it's a sudden painful loss of vision and the pain on ocular movement. So this actually points towards the diagnosis of the optic neuritis. Diagnosis where you are having the sudden painful diminution of vision and there is also pain on ocular movements. Then they are saying that there is a RAPD, that is relative afferent pupillary defect, and afferent nerve is the optic nerve. So that also points towards the optic neuritis, and one of the earliest manifestation of the optic nerve disease is RAPD, right? Then you can confirm it from the perimetry finding, because in cases of optic neuritis, you get either the central scotoma or we get the centrocecal scotoma. Either we get the central scotoma or we will get centrocecal scotoma. What do you mean by cecal here? Cecal means which is involving the blind spot. Which is actually involving the blind spot. So if the scotoma involves the blind spot, it is centrocecal. So what is the answer here? Optic neuritis, central scotoma can be found, RAPD could be found. Papilledema. Now, in papilledema, you will not have no pain on ocular movements. Then you will have the enlargement of the blind spot. What is the perimetry finding? There will be enlargement of the blind spot. There will be obscuration of the nasal margins. There will be obscuration of venous pulsations. There could be Champagne-Cock appearance. So it's very, very different from that of the optic neuritis. Retinoblastoma. Now, a person who is having retinoblastoma, first of all, the age should be less than 3 years, most common age of diagnosis of retinoblastoma. And what are the most common modes of presentation? If it is a patient of retinoblastoma, the most common is the leukocoria. So, whitish pupillary reflex. Along with this, there could be a squint. Then along with this, there could be a glaucoma. These are the most common presentations of a patient who is having the retinoblastoma, and most common age of presentation is 1.5 years. So 1.5 years with leukocoria, with squint, that is mostly convergent squint, then with glaucoma, with nystagmus, it could be a ERD, all these things along with the poor vision. These are the things that we require for the diagnosis of the retinoblastoma. So it's not retinoblastoma, it's not papilledema. Then we come to the CRVO. Now, CRVO is clearly outlined because, this is a painful diminution of vision, while CRVO will be painless. All the vascular occlusions are painless, whether it is CRAO or whether it is CRVO. So, again, a direct question from our classroom notes of the optic neuritis. We have unilateral, sudden, profound, total loss of vision, and there is painful, deep orbital pain, and this pain is aggravated by the ocular movements, right? Okay, coming to the next question. So next question is your VY procedure is used for the correction of. We have symblifron, we have entropion, ectropion and enchyloblepharon. Now first of all, try to see what are these terms. The first is symblifron. This is actually the adhesion. Sim means adhesion between the two conjunctiva. So you have the palpebral conjunctiva and you have the bulbar conjunctiva. So when we have the adhesion between the two conjunctiva, it is the symblifron. Entropion, it is the inward turning of the lid margin, inward turning of the lid margin, right? And ectropion is exactly the opposite. So this will be your outward turning. So this will be your outward turning of the lid margin, right? And enchyloblepharon. So this is actually the adhesion of the two eyelids. Adhesion of the two eyelids, right? So VY procedure where we are doing. So let's see. Now, if you see the ectropion and the entropion, again directly from our classroom notes, this is the outward turning of the lid margins. We have got different types of ectropion. It could be a congenital ectropion. It could be involutional or senile. That is the most common one. We have cicatricial. That is due to the scarring. We have spastic or paralytic. And then we have mechanical. So what are the things that we can do for the ectropion? So first one is the medial conjunctivoplasty. What you are doing, you are just doing the excision of a just small spindle shaped area, and this is taken from the conjunctiva or the subconjunctival tissue. That is why it is called as the medial conjunctivoplasty. Then secondly, we can also do the full thickness pentagonal incision. So this is a full thickness pentagonal incision that we are given, that is causing the horizontal lid shortening. So when there is a horizontal lid shortening, it will automatically, turn it in. Then another thing is called as the Bryan-Smith-Cohen's operation. So this is actually the modified version. Here again I am giving this full thickness pentagonal incision, but along with this I am also giving a triangular incision just lateral to this lateral canthus. If you see here, this is your full thickness pentagonal incision, and lateral to the lateral canthus I am giving another incision, triangular one, right? This is this one. Then we have got the paralytic ectropion. In the paralytic, when you have the paralysis, you can do the taping and you can also do the tarsorrhaphy. You can do the suturing. Now there is a thing called as the cicatricial ectropion where we have got scarring. So it is there we are using certain typical procedures, which is your VY operation and Z-plasty. So what is this V and Y? What we are doing, we are first giving this V-shaped excision, and then we are doing the suturing in a Y-shaped manner. I think it's very, very clear. First we are giving the incision in the V shape, and then we are suturing in the Y shape. We are doing suturing here, then here also, and this is called as the VY. Therefore, what will be the answer to the question? So let us see the options now. So your options are the symblifron, the entropion, ectropion and enchyloblepharon. Therefore, the answer will be your ectropion. So you have seen this is again directly from our classroom notes, the mechanical ectropion can be done by the VY plasty, or we can have the Z plasty, right? Now the next question, a girl has a ptosis and this is decreasing on sipping fluids or eating the food. What is the most likely diagnosis? Is it a mechanical ptosis, a Horner syndrome, a complicated ptosis, or the blepharophimosis syndrome? Now, if you see here, we've already discussed this in the videos as well as in the classes. What is a blepharophimosis syndrome? It's a syndrome. Syndrome means that it is actually associated with certain things. So, it has got a telecanthus. Do you remember what was telecanthus actually? Telecanthus means that you have got the increased intercanthal distance along with the normal interpupillary distance. That is called as telecanthus. Then we also have the epicanthus here. Epicanthus means we have got the semilunar folds over the medial canthus. This is called as the epicanthus. We have a broad nasal bridge, and this broad nasal bridge is actually responsible for the telecanthus, and then we have got the ptosis also. So we have got a lot of things which are associated. So obviously it's not a blepharophimosis syndrome. Now the ptosis which is associated with the usage of the jaw muscles, what is that called as? That is your Marcus-Gunn jaw winking phenomena. Again, directly from our notes here, what is happening in 5% of the congenital ptosis? So in about 5% of the patients who are having the congenital ptosis, there is actually a retraction of the lid when there is a contraction of ipsilateral pterygoid muscle. So it improves when the person is using eating or doing the jaw muscles contraction. There will be retraction of the eyelid. So I think this is the same one. Now instead of calling it as a Marcus-Gunn jaw winking phenomena, they have called it as complicated ptosis. So answer to this question is complicated ptosis. Blepharophimosis syndrome obviously is not the answer. We have seen Horner syndrome is very, very different. It is a oculosympathetic palsy that we know, and we have got a lot of components. What were the components of this Horner syndrome? We all know we have got ptosis, then we have got meiosis, then we have got the anhidrosis, and then we have got the loss of ciliospinal reflexes. Loss of ciliospinal reflexes is also there. Ma'am, you have not written enophthalmos. Yes, I have not written because it's just the apparent enophthalmos. So usually now we don't prefer to write the enophthalmos because it is not the true enophthalmos that you are getting in cases of the Horner syndrome, right? Okay, now coming to the next question. Again, I think a similar question came in your last year paper also, that happened in August 2020. So a 3-month child is presenting with the watering and discharge, and it is increasing on pressing the inner corner. So something here. So it looks as if it is related with lacrimal apparatus. The best management of the condition. So if you look at the options, we have syringing, we have sec massage, we have DCR and probing. So that means they have already given to you in a way that it is a case of the congenital dacryocystitis, right? So it is a case of the congenital dacryocystitis, and the child is 3 months. And we know, if you remember in our notes also, it's always given as the age wise. So what is the treatment 0 to 1 year? 0 to 1 year, we give a massage, the typical Krigler-Sec massage. It is the typical Krigler-Sec massage that we give. I think they asked the name of this massage last year. So we are doing this massage on the inner side, and you can do it with the help of your little finger. The nail should be trimmed. Proper aseptic hygienic measures should be taken. You have to start from the middle canthus, and you have to come with a firm stroke over the nasal cavity like this. So this is called as a Krigler-Sec massage in order to open up the membranous occlusion that has been occurred. So this membranous occlusion, how it takes place? This membranous occlusion takes place due to the involvement of the valve of Haisner. So because this child is also less than 1 year, 0 to 1 year, so we will go with the sec massage because this leads to the spontaneous resolution. This leads to the spontaneous resolution in 1 year in about 70 to 80% of the cases. So this is the treatment. Now when it is not improving, right? So 0 to 1 year, I can do the sec massage. And if the child is not improving or directly coming between 1 to 2 year, then I can do the syringing. Syringing means I can forcefully pass the nasal saline, so that anything which was not opening with the massage now can open up with the forceful movement of the normal saline. Then if it's not improving between 2 to 3 years, I can do the probing. So for probing, we are using the Bauman's lacrimal probe. Bauman's lacrimal probe. I think I have shown you this image also in the instrument section. Bauman's lacrimal probe. Then between 3 to 4 years, we can do alternate syringing and probing, and DCR we are doing after 4 years. So it should not be done before 4 years. So at 3 months of age, the answer will be your sec massage, right? Next question, again a direct question from our notes, community ophthalmology. Remember, hamesha I say ki community ophthalmology bhi important hai. So person has a vision of 3 by 60 to 1 by 60. It's less than 3 by 60, but it's more than 1 by 60 in the better eye. What is the type of blindness? So see this. I have given you directly that between 6 by 60 to 3 by 60 it is economic one, and the question is from 3 by 60 to 1 by 60. So it is the social blindness, and from 1 by 60 to PL positive is the legal blindness. So I think they have asked you the social blindness. So answer to this question will be your social blindness, a very, very direct one. Okay. The next one, a child with a history of malnutrition was examined and the following image has been given. What is the most likely diagnosis? So you have got this image. Unfortunately, this image is directly from our notes. The image is exactly the same that I show you in anterior staphyloma. So what is this? Can you see? There is actually the protrusion of the outer tunic of the eyeball, and it's the anterior. So this is actually what you call as the anterior staphyloma. Do you see? This was your smaller, whenever we have a smaller corneal perforation. When we have a smaller corneal perforation, then we have got the iris prolapse, we have got aberrant leukomas. But when we have got the larger perforation, in cases of the larger perforation, we have got what you call as anterior staphyloma. Now, what do you mean by the staphyloma? Actually, the staphyloma word is formed from the word staphylos. And staphylos means the bunch of grapes appearance. It is the bunch of grapes. So, it is actually the protrusion. It is actually the protrusion of the outer tunic of the eyeball. Outer tunic of the eyeball. It could be the cornea also. It could be the sclera also. So, it is always named with respect to the equator of the eyeball. So, if it is anterior to the equator, it is anterior staphyloma. If it is posterior to the equator, it is posterior staphyloma. If it is exactly at the equator, it is equatorial staphyloma. Simple. So, see, the image is also same. So, the answer to this question is the staphyloma. Clearly, you can see the protrusion of the anterior coat, the anterior 1/6 of the outer coat of the eyeball. Next question, a lady is presenting with the pain, proptosis, orbital swelling, loss of vision. Image is given. What is the most likely diagnosis? So what are the things you can see? I think a similar image came last year also. So what are the findings that we can see? So you can see this eye is protruded out. So we have the proptosis. This question becomes a question of proptosis. You can see the edema or the bulging of the conjunctiva. So chemosis is also there. A lot of redness is there. We have congestion, right? Then what are the other things you can see? Look at the pupil here. Pupil is also dilated. So we have got proptosis, we have chemosis, we have congestion, we have, a lot of inflammation. You can clearly see the inflammation here. So all the signs of inflammation are there. Pupil is also dilated here. See a similar picture that we have shown you in the classes also, very, very characteristic. So this is very, very characteristic of what? That is orbital cellulitis. Why, ma'am? It's not a stye. So what is stye actually? If you talk about the stye, it is just an external hordeolum. It is an external hordeolum which is actually a pus point. It is a pus point on the lid margin. So it is not causing the proptosis. Pus point on the lid margin will not cause proptosis or chemosis or congestion or pupillary dilatation. It will not cause. It will be just a pus point towards the outer side. Here it will be, and because it's a stye external hordeolum, so it will be pointing outward. Therefore, it is not a case. Plus, this patient is also having the loss of vision. So, obviously, the stye will not cause the loss of vision. Then second is blepharitis. Blepharitis is again the inflammation of the lid margin. So inflammation of the lid margin will again not lead to loss of vision or lot of chemosis and proptosis. So obviously answer is not stye and blepharitis. So it is a case of cellulitis. Now we have got two things. One is pre-septal cellulitis. One is orbital cellulitis. Now obviously it's not pre-septal. If it is anterior to the orbital septum, it's not reaching up to that place. It's not causing proptosis. So obviously it is not a pre-septal cellulitis. Answer is very clear that it is a case of orbital cellulitis. Next question. Now a historic question. Even on the last day, remember I gave it to this question in the last minute revision that we did on 17th of June, and I told you that FMG people always question comes on pterygium, and even there was 1 year when 3 questions were asked from pterygium. And see, there it goes. And in the classes, of course, we have discussed the pterygium. Okay, what is the most common treatment for the recurring pterygium? So we are not doing the observation, obviously, and simple excision we cannot do because it's a recurrent one. So you have something called as a mitomycin C, we have thiotapas, we have beta radiations, we have conjunctival autografting. So for the recurrent pterygium, the best will be your conjunctival autografting. Either the normal ones we can do the excision along with the mitomycin C, or we can also use the thiotapa drug, or I can also use the beta radiations. But for the recurrent one, okay, for the recurrent one, we are using the grafting. It could be conjunctival autografting, or we can also use the amniotic membrane grafting. They have given you conjunctival autograft, so your answer will be conjunctival autograft. Next question is a child who is 10 years and is having amblyopia in one eye, and they are asking the best treatment. So again, it's a direct question. They are asking you the treatment of choice for the amblyopia. Again, a direct question from the notes. If you remember, when we discuss about the what you called as the comitant squint, when we discuss the treatment of the comitant squint, what is the sequence that we discuss? First this is C, then we have O1, O2, S and P. So C for correction of refractive error, O1 is your occlusion therapy, O2 is ortho-optic exercises, S for surgery, and P for the prism for the remaining correction. So O, I always tell you that O for occlusion therapy is the most important treatment for the amblyopia. Why? Because amblyopia means the lazy eye. So whenever one eye is not able to see for a very long time, it loses its capacity to see. It loses its power. It becomes lazy. And that is why we actually want to occlude. Now, what do you want to occlude? This eye? No. We want to do the occlusion of the normal eye. When I am covering the normal eye, I am actually stimulating the squint eye to see. And that is the main idea behind giving the occlusion therapy. So, obviously, the answer to this question is your occlusion. And you should also know about the rule of occlusion. You should also know about the rule of occlusion, because you cannot, keep on occluding the normal eye all the time. Otherwise, it will become lazy. So, we have to do it in the ratio X is to 1. What is this X is to 1? X is the age in the years. So, whatever age is of the child. Suppose the child is 3 years. So, we have to do 3 is to 1. So, 3 days we have to do the occlusion, and then 1 day we have to keep it open. Then 3-day occlusion, 1 day open. 3-day occlusion, 1 day open. Similarly, if the child is 4 years, then 4-day occlusion, 1 day open, 4-day occlusion, 1 day, and something like this. And it becomes refractory after 5 to 6 years. It becomes refractory. So it's very important that you should give the proper treatment of the amblyopia within the time. Alright, next question. Again, an iconic question, and I told you that whatever questions have been asked in the NEET can definitely come. You people were asking me that, ma'am, should we do the NEET papers? Yes, definitely. The 3 years NEET paper, AIMS paper, I told you to do. And see, NEET, this question was asked in NEET 2018 also, 2019 also. So this question came, a man suffered from the trauma to the right eye. Which kind of trauma? It was a punch. So the punch trauma means that it is actually a blunt trauma. We know that trauma, fist injury, a punch injury is always a blunt trauma. So which of the following is the most likely to occur? So which wall is the most common to fracture? Inferior wall, medial wall, lateral wall, or the subluxation of the lens? So I think this has been asked so many times. Even in the classes, I have told you that this is a NEET question asked in 2018, 2019, and most common fracture is in the inferior wall. So I think it's a very, very direct question, right? So answer is the inferior orbital wall fracture, which is the most common one. All right. Coming to the next one, a patient is diagnosed with a complicated cataract, and on the slit lamp findings are given below. What is the type of cataract? Now there were a lot of controversy on this question, because I got a mixed response on this, that what type of image was asked. So certainly it was a complicated cataract, but which cataract was asked? Mostly there were two reviews. One group of people said that it was a image of posterior subcapsular cataract, while the other group of people said that it was a posterior polar cataract. Nevertheless, we can see both. So if it was this image, guys, so this is actually your posterior subcapsular cataract. In that case, the answer will be your posterior subcapsular cataract, right? And if it was something like this, where you are getting a typical onion ring kind of a thing, onion ring cataract, then it is a posterior polar cataract. But the important thing is that I told you that always the fancy cataracts are asked, they are always important. And if you remember now, again in the last minute revision for FMG that we did on the last day, I had given you a question on this onion ring cataract, which is typically found in the posterior polar cataract. Then we also discussed in the last minute revision the different morphologies of the cataract. See, this was your anterior polar cataract, then the posterior polar cataract, nuclear cataract, lamellar cataracts. So I think that is very, very clear. Then again in the last minute revision, we also discussed about this posterior subcapsular cataract. So I do not know why there is confusion between the posterior subcapsular cataract or posterior polar cataract, but whichever figure it is, I think it will be easier for you to tell. If you are getting this plaque like thing exactly in the center, then it is a posterior subcapsular cataract, and if you are getting a typical onion ring, then it's a posterior polar cataract. All right. Okay, coming to the next question. A person is coming with the jaundice and tremors, and I think beating tremors were asked. The beating tremors was there, and they gave a typical finding. I think diagnosis is clear from this typical finding. What is this? This is actually the typical, called as the KF ring. So again, I have told you so many times that KF ring and the Wilson's disease forms a very important question and have been asked so many times. So asking the diagnosis, this is very, very clear cut. The Wilson's disease, you will not get the Wilson's KF ring in any of these diseases, be it Huntington's chorea or Sydenham chorea or metal poisoning. You can get the tremors in these places, but you will not get the jaundice, and you will not get the typical KF ring. And again, a direct question from our notes. KF ring has been discussed a lot of times in the app as well as in the classes. Okay. Now the next question. I think this is par excellence, and I do not know, I was having some sixth sense and gut feeling that they are going to ask the mucormycosis, and see, I kept a question in your last leave for FMG in the clinical scenarios, and a very similar kind of a question has been asked. Even in my question on day 10, the patient was having the lid edema and MRI orbit, and that was done, and we were having the answer as the mucormycosis, and a very similar kind of a question has been asked here. Here you are having a 60-year-old diabetic male with a history of breathlessness, pyrexia, tachypnea, generalized malaise, and RT-PCR positive. On day 10, developed bilateral orbital swelling with proptosis. What is the most common organism? I think as if they have taken up this question. See this 60-year male. So even the age of the patient is same, 60 year. Even the age of the patient is same, 60 years, and same day 10 पे lid edema with proptosis. इससे ज़्यादा similar question नहीं आ सकता. So answer is very, very clear cut, the mucormycosis. Okay. Then next question, which of the following is the gold standard for measuring the intraocular pressure? And now look at the notes picture, gold standard is your Goldman's applanation tonometer, and rather if you remember, I always tell you कि gold से याद रखना है, gold standard is your Goldman's applanation tonometer. Most commonly used is your Schwartz indentation tonometer, while the gold standard is Goldman's applanation tonometer. So again, a direct question from the notes. Next question. What is the diagnosis from the given fundus having a diabetes with the painless loss of vision? I think this is very, very characteristic and exactly the same image that has been discussed in the class of the CRVO. And if you remember, I told you that diabetic retinopathy and hypertension retinopathy don't miss, and we have revised this nth number of times in the live sessions also. So this is the typical CRVO, right? So it is the CRVO. Okay. Then there was a question on oil droplet. I could not get the exact language of the question, but yes, I got this information that there was a question on this oil droplet cataract. Now, I think they have asked you the enzyme deficiency. So we all know that this oil droplet cataract, okay, it occurs due to the classical galactosemia. It occurs due to the classical galactosemia, and classical galactosemia occurs due to the galactose 1-phosphate uridyl transferase, right? So if you remember, we always discuss that this is actually, the integration of the ophthalmology with the biochemistry, even the enzyme defect. And what about the non-classical one? The non-classical one, maybe we have got the enzyme deficiency, but that is your galactokinase. So if they have given you the image of oil droplet cataract, your answer will be galactose 1-phosphate uridyl transferase enzyme deficiency. All right. Okay. Next question. A person is having a brain lesion, is presenting with a macular sparing, homonymous hemianopia. What could be the site of lesion? Now, I think this is very, very clear cut. This is very, very clear cut, and in the classes we have discussed whole of the visual pathway. So what is that? See, up to the optic tract. If I talk about the optic tract, we have before the optic tract we have heteronymous. After optic tract we have homonymous hemianopia, but up at the level of optic tract it is actually the incongruous type. It is incongruous type. Then after this optic tract we have the lateral geniculate body and we have the optic radiations. Now they are in the verge of becoming the congruous, but still they are not. And finally at the level of your visual cortex. So when I am talking about the visual cortex, at the level of this visual cortex, it actually becomes the congruous. That is, it is similar, homonymous. It is actually in harmony with extent and severity. Now, because what happens in the visual cortex, we have got two blood supply. We have posterior cerebral artery as well as the middle cerebral artery in the macular area. So, if I am having a problem only in the posterior cerebral artery, then therefore we can have the sparing of macula. So, sparing of macula, which is actually related with your occipital cortex, right? Okay, next one. What is the most common finding seen in the fundus of a patient with the diabetes who is having the diabetes more than 20 years duration? So basically they are talking about the diabetic retinopathy. We have got two types. We have NPDR and we have got the PDR. Now, if I talk about the most common, obviously it is NPDR. And if you look at this image, I do not know, because again there was a mixed response. Some people said that it was NPDR image that was given, but some people said that it was a PDR and there was neovascularization. So guys, I do not know what was the exact image, but if it was something like this, here you can see we are having the, is it visible with this color? We are having the microaneurysms. Then we have got these dots. We have got these larger one blots, and you can see these exudates also. So you are seeing that there is no neovascularization here. So in that case, the answer will be your non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy. But in case, there was image something like this, because in the classes we have discussed both NPDR and PDR. So if it was something like this, where there was a lot of neovascularization over the disc, there was NVD as well as there is NVE, then the answer will be proliferative. So look at the, comparison that we have discussed in the classes, non-proliferative and proliferative. So it's always first the non-proliferative and then it is moving towards the proliferative. Non-proliferative mein I will have hemorrhages, I will have dot and blot, I will have exudates, microaneurysms, but there will be no neovascularization. Only when you see the neovascularization, your answer will be PDR. So I do not know a neovascularization was there in the image or not, but if neovascularization was there, it was a PDR, otherwise it's NPDR. Okay. Alright. Coming to the next question now, pigmentary changes. Now, again, the language of the question, I'm not sure of this. They said that there was a question on salt and pepper retinopathy. So I have taken this question that I have discussed nth number of times in the classrooms as well as in the app. So salt and pepper retinopathy was there in the questions, right? So here it is present in all except. So here the answer is resolving retinal detachment. It is something like this that we have discussed in the classes also, salt and pepper retinopathy. And you have got number of causes. The most common, if I talk about, is your congenital syphilis. You have got the congenital syphilis, then you have got the acquired syphilis, right? And then we have got the congenital rubella. That is the most common cause. Congenital rubella, congenital syphilis, acquired syphilis. Then you have got the fundus flavimaculatus. Then drug toxicity like phenothiazines are there. Then sometimes it could be atypical RP. Atypical retinitis pigmentosa could be there. Then we can have maculocerebrofacial degeneration. So these are number of causes where they have given you congenital rubella, fundus flavimaculatus and phenothiazine toxicity. So answer will be your resolving retinal detachment. Okay. The next question. Again, I do not know the exact language of this question, but many people told me that there was a direct question on keratoconus. So I have taken this as the question. We have discussed a very similar image of keratoconus in the classes also. So what is the refractive error that we are going to have in cases of keratoconus? See, when I am talking about the keratoconus, what we are having in instead of this cornea, I am having this cornea. So there is an increase, axial length. There is an increase in the axial length of the eyeball. That is very, very clear. And because there is an increase in the axial length, so there will be myopia. And there is also an irregular surface. So due to the irregular surface, we have astigmatism. Therefore, the answer to this question is myopia and astigmatism. Only astigmatism and only myopia will be incomplete. Hypermetropia cannot be there. Okay, then the next question. Again, a very iconic question. I told you that the images of conjunctiva and cornea are very, very important and very often asked. And see this, even in the last minute revision, that we did one day before, I have discussed with you the sago grain follicles, and I think a similar kind of image of the sago grain follicles, the same that we have discussed in the classroom notes also, had come in the examination, and they say that the above pathology is associated with chlamydia trachomatis, Neisseria gonorrhoeae. So it is not Neisseria gonorrhoeae, because Neisseria gonorrhoeae will cause the purulent conjunctivitis. It is not causing the follicles, it is causing the purulent conjunctivitis. Then Corynebacterium diphtheriae is also not the answer, because it is causing the membranous conjunctivitis. These also images we all discussed one day back only. Moraxella Axenfeld, this causes angular conjunctivitis. This also I showed you. So answer to this question is chlamydia trachomatis, which is causing your sago grain follicles, right? Then the next question. Now again, people told me that there was a question on ophthalmoscopy. I do not know what kind of question it was, whether a direct ophthalmoscope was asked or an indirect ophthalmoscope was asked, but we have already discussed actually both the kind of ophthalmoscopes in the classes. So I hope whatever image had come, you could do it. I have taken one reference question, like if this image had come, which is actually a direct ophthalmoscope, then how can you solve this kind of a question? All of the following are true about the above procedure, except it can be done with the patient being in any position. So this is a true statement. It has no stereopsis. This is also a true statement. It can be used in the cases of the hazy media. This is a false statement. You can use an indirect ophthalmoscope in the hazy media, not the direct one. The retinal periphery cannot be visualized. This is again a true statement. So the answer to this question will be your C, right? Next question, a patient present with the ocular motility defect, position is shown, identify the nerve. Now again, I do not know that this particular image was asked or not, but I got this information that there was a question on the third nerve palsy. So I have taken this image because it is showing you the third nerve palsy. The eye is actually the down and out, and we know whenever the eye is down and out, what nerve palsy we have? We have the oculomotor nerve palsy. We have discussed this in the classes also, because third nerve is supplying all the extraocular muscles except for superior oblique and the lateral rectus. So due to superior oblique, the eye will be depressed, and due to the lateral rectus, it will be out. So eye will be down and out due to the working of these two muscles, superior oblique and the lateral rectus. Next question, they have asked you the diagnosis. Again, a very, very important thing. And see, again, I have discussed this question in the last minute revision one day before only, that these are the white foamy spots. The Bitot spots are again very, very important. And then we have discussed this in the classes also, the Bitot spots. So again, a direct question from our notes. What is this? So it's not a pingicula. Pingicula is yellowish in color, and pterygium is having the apex towards the cornea. Phylictin is a small nodule which is present at the limbus. Phylictin will be just a nodule which is present at the limbus. These two, then pingicula and pterygium will be yellowish, and therefore the answer to this question is Bitot spots. These are your white foamy spots present on the temporal side, and apex is away from the cornea. So we have discussed, I think, almost all the questions which came from ophthalmology, and fortunately we got lot of questions from ophthalmology, as we get always more than 25 questions means a lot, and almost, you know, all the questions have come up directly from the notes. We have revised them so many times, and even many of the images we have revised one day before even. And I think mucormycosis was a real lucky one. That was exactly the same question that was repeated. So I hope your paper went well, and those of you are future aspirants of FMG will definitely benefit from this session, and wish you all the very best. Thank you, and happy ophthalmology.